So, sorry. Let's go back to the discussion. So, I was asking you if my characterization of the situation is correct around arenas. Like the way I deploy arenas and like allocate items and like consider lifetimes, like there's an absence of hygienic practices that I don't have. And that's why I run up against like certain bugs that I have to fix in an ad hoc way that you think would be more fundamentally solved if I have a more coherent style around arena usage, correct? Or okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm happy that you are willing to do a collab with me and like sort of like show me how I can do better, because arenas, I have to say, like, obviously a vast majority of the memory bugs that I encounter when I'm writing programs in C have gone away, but that doesn't mean all bugs have gone away. Right? Like in my streams this year, I have literally shown like, oh my God, like there is technically like a use after free sort of ish version of arenas where like I confused when I should be, when lifetimes survive or not, right? And like that's effectively a kind of use after free situation. And then there's something about what you call the arena aliasing bug as well.
Yep.
And would you can categorize that as a separate issue or still related to the kind of like...
Let me think. So arena aliasing creates a use after free bug where the code doesn't look like there should be one. So the code will look like it is correct, because if you aren't aware of certain stylistic rules you have to adopt, then the code looks like it's correct, but it's actually doing a use after free.
Yes.
And that's happening because of arena aliasing. That's a common issue. If you want me to summarize, a lot of what happens here is that there are a couple of different ways to organize an entire project around arenas, and and if you are not sure which one you're doing, then you're going to run into a lot more issues related to arenas. And the problem with arena issues is that they are spooky. Like they're the thing that make people afraid of memory unsafety in the first place. Like, oh, changing data over here is somehow reflected in some unrelated thing over there, or like whatever, like that kind of spooky memory action kind of stuff. That can while it cleans up most of your, like, you're probably not going to have leaks that are hard to track down. If you don't figure out very clearly, like, here's how I know I'm allowed to use this arena when I use it, then you will run into those kinds of issues. And so you have to pick one of several different styles of how you're going to convince yourself that it's okay to be using the arena you're using it at every line of code.
There's also some additional concerns that I have, usually around the growth of individual arenas. So we have talked offline about the fact that if I do think that there's some kind of allocations I have to do that is, let's say, dependent on some external force that I am not in control of. So it could be that I'm running, my terminal is, somebody's using my terminal and they run some long-standing server daemon, right? That will be printing output or depending on terminal resources for days on end. And like that's unbounded memory growth. And of course, there are strategies to do about like how you map things to disk, and like there's always a limit to everything. But what I'm trying to say is like there might be n megabytes or gigabytes that I don't know how far it's going to go and for how long. And that doesn't happen often, but the times that it does happen, I don't know how to use arenas for that, because right now my code base is structured around fixed size arenas. And so when I don't know how to grow arenas, I just switch to something like a stretchy buffer, right? Like Sean Barrett's stretchy buffer or something. But then it feels like is there a way, I guess it's one of my questions for you is like, is there a way to is it worth making growth of arenas work instead of having to fall back to stretchy buffers when at the first sign of trouble? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'd like to pick your brain on that and like see if we can dig into the places in my code base where I am using stretchy buffers, and like maybe get your input on like, no, like there's actually no need for this. There might be something better kind of thing. Yeah,
there's it's definitely worth it to save most of that conversation for when we actually do the collab stream to put it all in one place.
Absolutely.
But that there are limits to like where arenas are clear wins, and then places where you're it's not, I wouldn't want to say it's a trade-off. It's more so like the advantage of sticking to arenas is it's a diminishing return to pushing towards arenas. The advantages and disadvantages really depend on the cases you're looking at. So
Right. So there's no generic statement you can make from my comments. It really has to be touched on contextually, which is
and quite frankly, and this is something that we maybe will touch on in our first collab, and maybe we'll expand upon over time. But like, because I've been programming on arenas for many years now, and it's sort of like the entire curriculum of computer science, data structures, and algorithms needs to be retaught in the arena mode if you want to get the confidence that you can do all of this stuff with arenas. Like, if you are used to thinking of things as arrays and how you'll deal with arrays, and hash tables and how you'll deal with hash tables, but you weren't taught any of that in the land of arena-based memory management, then they seem like things that just don't fit. But you can, if you take time, find out how they do fit. And some things become easier, other things become harder. And going, in my opinion, going all the way into one mode or the other is better. But I could also see a person looking at this and be like, why don't I try to get the best of like malloc and realloc and free stretchy buffers when that shows up, like when that would be best, and best of arenas. And if you can make a coherent style out of it, that would be great. I haven't found that. I have found that the easiest way to make a coherent style is to learn how to do how to do these other types of data structures on arenas.
Right. And we can mine, so just to let the audience know, like we can mine certain subjects even beyond arenas, because like when we talk about string manipulation, right? And a lot of people here in the handmade community, for some reason, work on programs that just involve a lot of parsing of text and string inputs and things like that. And like, so my string API is also Alan's and also uses arenas as a backup, right? But then there are certain cases where I feel like, well, I need to poke some buffers directly, and I feel like I have to use C string processing here. But then with Alan, with your string API, like, you know, the interface of, I guess, the data type is basically this kind of like a struct that has the buffer and then has a length, and you carry that with you across function calls and things like that. And sometimes I have concerns about like, well, this string that I'm using, I'm going to pass it on to the OS now through some kind of system call that like might expect the string to have a null terminated thing, or maybe the string processing doesn't need null terminated, but I don't know if it is null terminated. And it's like that question of like passing all these strings around, there's still some underlying buffer that may or may not have a null terminated string depending on how it was constructed in the first place, and how do you check for these things. And like, I get a little overwhelmed. Like, I love using the string API. It is far simpler, but I still, when I have to get to the meat of like low level processing of things, the null terminator question is still very much present, and I don't know how to deal with it.
Yep, that is super true. We can spend, that's like a solvable problem, but there is, you know, one thing to also talk about, and again, we're laying out like a big, we can put into the actual conversations about this.
This is just a taste. It's just a teaser.
But some of the answers are getting real about how much performance do you need at the level of like a system call boundary. Do you need to make the system calls, like very, very rarely do I find that the little fluff surrounding a system call matters, because the cost of a system call itself is usually high enough that it's like, I need to get the n, like I want the n of the number of system calls I'm dealing with low. And so if that's true, then a little bit of fluff around them is not that big a deal. Whereas if I'm dealing with a thing where it's like, hey, I'm parsing giant text files because I'm making, you know, some kind of data spec format to ingest into my thing. I'm making some kind of text parser for whatever reason. Fluff there is harder to swallow, because we're talking about processing large amounts of data. That's like, I'm making my deep loop there. I can't, if I say that n is low there, it's like the same thing as saying, well, I'm going to make my game fast by keeping the poly count low. It's like, sure, that's a solution, but if you want it to do more stuff, it has to make n has to
Interesting.
be allowed to be large there. So there are places where I think it feels necessary to the feeling that it is necessary to worry about certain things is false because it's like you can't ever make this fast. So don't worry about it. We will do an easy thing and we will stop losing sleep over it. And in other places we'll go, okay, we're not going to lose sleep over this. We're just going to stop using the string API because it needs to go faster than what the string API allows. The string API, because quite frankly, we live in a text mode world where like all of our computing
True.
is built in text mode. And this isn't just our text files for programming. It's like how URLs and command line interfaces like terminal click is dealing with, and everything is text mode. It is the interface. It is the generic interface piece that we use everywhere. And as long as that remains true and you're dealing with programs, you're going to have like a config file with little strings, file paths, little strings, URLs, little strings, email addresses, little strings. You have to deal with them so much that having a high level API for that, that's what that's for, is the fact that it's a glue to all these different things. But it doesn't have to be your performance answer, and also you don't always need performance in places.
Yeah,
like, there are ways
Yeah.
to fluff on your performance where it doesn't matter to make the string API not painful to use.
And I must say that I do have this tendency to want to find. This is kind of counterintuitive because the Hammock community wants to think of itself as not dogmatic in all the classic ways, right? Like we have all these philosophies that we have learned to not be that useful. Like, hey, this is how you organize code through object-oriented programming and thinking about modeling the world in this way. We don't like that. And then we're like, okay, we also don't like clean code, and we hate Uncle Bob's practices and like so on and so forth, right? But then I now have this impulse of like, wait, Mr. Forth's philosophy actually delivers results, in my opinion. Like I have been able to advance terminal click features by studying the way you do things, but now I have the impetus to ask you questions of like, give me your, what, not Uncle Bob's, but like, Uncle Forth's tenets for how to do something. I just asked you a few questions like literally a few minutes ago about arenas and like strings and all these stuff. And I'm expecting you to give me like the commandments from on high, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you sort of like forcing me to have to always think about ground truth, if that makes sense. Like look at your code, look at what you're doing, look at the context, look at the surrounding variables, environment, and like also what the cost is. If it's negligible, like why are you even worrying about this in the first place, right? So on and so forth. Like I need to get better at that, I suppose. And I still think the Hammock community still has a tendency, like even though we like to think that, yeah, we hate on Uncle Bob's practices, we hate on OOP, we hate on all these traditional things, but let's be careful not to then fall into a new set of dogma, I suppose.
Yeah, learning how to be flexible and effective as much as like on what you're trying to do is never going to sound like commandments, because commandments are too inflexible. So like effectiveness will come out of like spending more time going like, okay, what is it that I feel I cannot do here and why? And sometimes you find out that like your whys are just bad and you just can do the thing you thought you couldn't, or like whatever. So I try not to be precious about like you must be using the string API, or you must always be in a situation where this, one thing you could do, and I used to do this with the string stuff, is make sure there's always a null terminator at all times. You use a length and a capacity so you can grow it and shrink it and stick null terminators there as needed. Because it feels kind of funny. The alternative, which we'll talk about more in the full one, but the alternative is stuff like making a copy of the string that has a null terminator on the end, because you don't know if there's one there or not. And it's like, can I really afford to be copying the string? It's like, well, yes, it turns out if you can't afford to be copying it, then you will have to stop using the string API, sure. But that will mean you are in a very unique case too. And the point is to give you a glue for the 80%, 90% of cases where constantly worrying about your null terminator is not flexible enough of an attitude.
That observation, Alan, I think will go beyond the string stuff, right? I just real quick, you mentioned like, yeah, if you have to copy the string, then copy your string. Like, so for those who missed it, because I showed this at the very, very beginning of the stream, I finished implementing like this little auto suggestion box for people, right? And Like it's neat. Like if you type in CD now, like you can choose your options. There's filtering involved as well. Quick filtering if you want. If you scroll away, and like, but keep navigating, like it just snaps back to where it needs to go. Oh, cool. If I press enter now you get like this little pop-up telling you like, hey, you don't need to CD at all. So like this is the things I'm excited for Terminal Click to do, right? It's like upgrading people to a new workflow, right? So now they know that they don't have to use CD at all actually, and just like use control. Anyway, but with this auto suggestion thing, I take in a linked list, Alan, for it. And I was like, oh wait, if I'm taking a linked list, but I'm doing like keyboard navigation, and then I have to like snap back if I scroll away, like that involves some level of random indexing actually. That I was like, wait, I would prefer to have an array here, but I'm doing linked list, and like, how do I solve this? I did have the impetus, thankfully, to just copy the list into an array, right? So like, if I go to TC auto suggestion box, let's see where it's defined. Here it is. Here's the comment: pull suggestions into an array. I don't know if this is how you would do it, but like, hey, here's the size of the array. Call push array, right? And just literally dumb thing, go through each item in the linked list and store it in the array. And now wonderful. For the rest of the function, I'm just using the array.
Yep. No, yeah, that's one of my very favorite methods, is to collect things up. So there's a lot we could talk about in this direction, and we should at some point decide. We've given everyone a good taste of what
let me make this the final,
the
final commentary.
But yes, to answer this specific thing, there is a very common pattern that I use in Arena programming, where you arrange your data in a loose data structure like a linked list. Where by loose we mean it's easy to add things. It grows. You're worried about growth. It grows very cheaply. You don't have to keep things in order while it's growing. You can interleave it with other things. So I can grow my list and then grow a different list and then grow this list again. Like it's very flexible to use a linked list of nodes. And then you go, I need to go fast now. And you convert, like you take that data and you arrange it differently to maximize for its new use case of being a read-only data structure. You're no longer building the thing, but you're doing lots of work on it that needs to go fast, and that will be faster if you random index it, and if it's smaller and that kind of thing. So I do that all the time. Now I'm not making claims about what is the fastest thing to do. What I'm making claims about are what is something that gets the job done, that has a bunch of options for how you could maneuver it into other states. So if your code is in a state that is not fast enough, what I've just described is a state that can be maneuvered to a faster state much more easily. Because you go, okay, this linked list option isn't working. What if I use nodes with like chunks of 64 pieces of data in each node? So now I'll allocate less, and I'll have like my lists will be more contiguous. And it's like, no, that's not really the big difference. You'll be able to explore more freely. Whereas if you started off with an array and you had to like constantly be figuring out like if it's growing or not, that you will always have baked in now the like, okay, make sure I free my array, and the carrying through with each change I make, like, oh, am I still freeing everything properly? So each new iteration has more friction. So I really focus on first maximizing my iteration potential, and then using that to fix things like performance later.
And to answer a question from the chat, yes. So when I start the Twitch collabs, it would be a good idea to post this on YouTube. I usually don't post my streams on YouTube because they're very casual streams that are meandering all kinds of places. But with Alan, I have very specific goals with Alan that he's going to help me with, and I'm grateful for. And I think it would be insightful anyway to share that in a more official capacity. So this will go up on YouTube, whether it's, I guess, Alan, you and I are collabing not just with streams, but I guess YouTube now in some ways. Yeah, so like we gotta decide where it gets published and how, but like we will. Like it's completely fine.
Cool.
Cool. This is awesome. Anything else I wanted to mention? I think that's it. So everything you guys saw, it's a bit of a teaser. So these kinds of conversations have been in a bit of a vacuum. I only showed an example or two, but like what Alan's gonna do is I literally have a use case. I have a case study. I have an actual arena bug that I encountered a few days ago that I'm not gonna show today. So when Alan and I start an official collab, we're gonna look into that bug specifically, and hopefully from there we get to dig into my code base and start like tightening the loose screws, if you know what I mean, using hopefully Alan's commentary. And so that's the idea. It'll be sometime this week. Alan, have we decided maybe like what the best day to do this? Because you and I meet in person on Wednesday, so that's a little rough for Wednesday.
I don't think we've decided. I mean, if you wanted to talk about it now, we could, but we could also talk about it off stream. But by Friday.
Yes. By Friday.
By Friday, this will be happening.
Yes.
But maybe we don't have an exact time.
You don't know the best time for it now. Like Alan and I are not both indie, so we have schedules that are like pretty out there, pretty wild. So, but we will make this happen by Friday. Make sure you follow either myself or Alan. I guess it doesn't matter now with the stream together feature. Follow either of us or both of us.
I mean, like if it's really such a bother that you can't follow both of us, follow Abner for now. I'll convince you on the next one.
Sounds good. It'll be obvious when we start the streaming collab this week, because it sounds like Twitch gives you notifications for both of us streaming together. So this should be easy. So sometime this week. Thank you for all the comments and like helping us set up this thing. It sounds like it's successful. So like it took us a minute, but this should work just fine for next time. So
fingers crossed that
Alan.
Work next time.
Yes, for sure. Okay. Appreciate you, Alan, and talk to you again this week. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with your stream.
Psyched. See you later.
All right.
I see how I can end